slipping away, and I didn't want it to be gone before we had a chance to have another town hall meeting. So thank you to those of you who are here in person. Thank you to those who are watching us via the live stream. It's really good to have this opportunity to see you. I thought what I would do, I do have some leaders that have joined me, both on the stage but also in the audience. Dorothy Anderson, in charge of HR, Craig White, our interim finance and administration senior VP. Mike Richards is representing the HSC, and I appreciate you being here. Scott Souders here representing our legal counsel office, and Rich Wood is here representing, of course, the provost's office. So thank you here, and then we have some other leaders in the audience just in case there are some questions that can be more specifically addressed by talking to them. So I thought I'd do a very brief presentation, and then I want the bulk of this to be an opportunity to answer your questions. So you all know we're doing a number of executive searches. I did announce this week James Holloway as the provost effective July 1st. We've now, with the Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration, have interviewed the 4 finalists, and so I'll be meeting with the search committee and gathering the feedback in the coming days with the hope of making a decision within a week or two. I also, we've now interviewed the finalists, the 4 finalists for the Vice President for Equity and Inclusion, and all that information is in. It's just for me to digest, which is among the to-do list I have for this weekend to figure out the next steps in hiring someone for that position. We have launched a vice provost actually for enrollment management. That position is going to be critical for us. As you know, our enrollments are, they are constantly a challenge in a state that is demographically not growing. So an important role for us, and that will be progressing. And then behind the scenes, of course, there is a search for a CEO for our foundation. So I thought I'd quickly talk a bit about budget and compensation. Some of you, I look around the room and realize that many of you are actually present for the Board of Regents meeting, and so I'm not saying anything different than what you may have already heard, but when I was in Faculty Senate this week, there were a lot of questions about what was actually approved or not at the board meeting. So that board meeting was a special board meeting that was called because the day before our originally scheduled budget summit, we got some new information about expectations related to raises. And so as I explained at that special meeting, it was a great opportunity for us as an institution to think about what we could do to actually raise compensation for our faculty and staff. And so the budget leadership team came back with a recommendation which then was considered carefully along with an alternative recommendation that was also discussed during the Board of Regents meeting. And where we landed is support for a 3% raise for faculty and staff effective July 1st. We will go to the governor and the legislature with a request for the additional 1%, what we call, I think we call it deficient funding. We'll make a request for the additional funding that allows us to get to the 4% that was requested and said to be expected, and understandably so. As I said very clearly and want everyone to know, our goals for raising compensation for our faculty and staff are aligned with what I know the governor was attempting to do. And so we share a common goal here. So we'll see where all of this lands, but what we can assure people of is that 3% raise in compensation. Now, one of the reasons why going to 4% was such a challenge for us is that we are only funded less than half of the amount of money that, or we're about 46% shy of what we actually need. And so we don't have the revenue from the state that allows us to provide raises across the board to everyone at the 4% level. So even with what we did was approve a 3.1% tuition increase. Our students our faculty were firmly supportive of that, even knowing that it represents a continued hardship for families that are trying to afford college education. We are having to continue to use reserves to cover the budget hole, and we will continue to have to do some cuts. So we have some work to do on the compensation front and on our budgets, really on main campus and the health sciences side. Now, I did want to acknowledge that prior to the meeting today, I received a question from one of our faculty who asked us about whether or not the 3% raise would apply to people who are paid on a per course basis. So our adjunct faculty who, depending upon where they work, earn a differing amount based on the individual unit where they are. So in the case of adjunct faculty, individual deans determine the pay schedule, and there are usually some complex rules and calculations that have made it difficult for the institution as a whole to decide to distribute or to mandate a particular percentage increase. But we're going to look at that to see how we might be able to apply a 3% to of state-funded compensation to these groups. So I appreciate the question. We will look into what that could look like for us for this coming fiscal year. Moving on, one of the things that has been an issue when I called for feedback on what we should talk about in this forum, in this town hall, campus safety was again raised as an issue, and I think many of you are aware of the extent to which I've regarded this as a high priority for us for a number of reasons. And there's no doubt that we must continue to collaborate with local authorities to really make a difference, not really just on what happens on our campus, because the real issues for us really are areas that sometimes surround our campus. And so we've put a lot of things in place. We've received additional funding to do even more work. We have seen some progress related to our partnerships and our security cameras with regard to auto thefts. Our police department is working closely with the city task force on auto theft. And I admit that we still have additional work to be done, but we are focused on this issue and will continue to be focused on it. So many of you are aware that, earlier this year, a petition was filed for unionization of faculty on main campus. I just want to assure everyone that I have always, in my history as a higher education leader, been committed to shared governance and issues related to academic freedom. And I absolutely affirm the right of our faculty to make this choice, to decide to unionize. This is a faculty decision. My hope and my goal is that we can make sure that people are fully aware of all the information related to unionization. And I want to commit to making sure that there's access to sufficient information. And obviously, if the faculty vote in favor, we will absolutely and fully respect that decision. I've worked in unionized environments before very successfully, and so this is my commitment to the campus. We do have a labor management board meeting. It's a labor management relations board meeting that is scheduled for 9 o'clock on Monday. And then many of you may be aware that there is a full faculty meeting that has been called by the Committee on Governance that will take place on Tuesday, currently scheduled from 10 to 12. I know that advice on how to do this has been sent out by the Committee on Governance. The bylaws say that I will chair this meeting and really facilitate it. I believe that faculty who are going to need to vote on accepting the agenda have to show up early, show ID, sign in. So the doors will open at 8:30 and then the meeting will start promptly at 10 o'clock. And I look forward to the kinds of information that get shared by the various groups that are likely to speak. And there'll be opportunities for people to ask questions. So we, as I mentioned earlier, have been dealing with the enrollment declines. Did I miss one? I wasn't there? One off. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Somebody has to tell me what's going on behind me. So we've been dealing with the enrollment issue, and so this slide basically just lets you know that we've had an enrollment task force in place. There have been 70 people, I think, working on this task force. A lot of our campus leaders and faculty, and a remarkable group that have been working on several different aspects of the enrollment issue. There are more than 30 recommendations, 150 sub-recommendations, but you can go to the website that's part of the President's initiatives, and you will find highlights related to this report. A lot of actions to be taken, a lot that have already been taken, but this will continue to be a major focus for leadership because of the clear implications for this institution going forward. So the next one, okay. Many of you might remember that on my 200-day address to the campus, I mentioned that we need to do something related to perceptions of our campus. We are often scrutinized and presumed to be engaged in bad behavior. Let's just call it something simple, bad behavior. And I really think that we as a campus need to embrace issues associated with ethics, ethical decision-making, ethical practices. And so I've received a proposal for some ideas that we might pursue, such as having regular ethics training, really looking at our university policies and procedures related to ethics to make sure they align with what we want to be as UNM, developing some best practices and encouraging due diligence about detection of major issues. And we already have some things in place on our campus, but really this would be a whole look at what we're doing at every level. Including the possibility of a visiting scholar in ethics. So what I hope is that this is something that we'll be pursuing as the semester comes to an end and as the summer, as we get going with summer, so that we can have this fully launched by the beginning of fall semester for people on campus. So I have been promoting since last year the University for New Mexico. We were recently named a top 10 Tier 1 research military-friendly school, which has been one of my initiatives. We did a remarkable thing with the UNM Gives campaign, where we raised nearly $1 million, which is just phenomenal for UNM. And so I was very proud of what we were able to do. Many of you are aware that Health Sciences and I have partnered with the mayor on a homelessness initiative, and we see this as a critical part of really helping our environment here in Albuquerque deal with what is a serious issue, sometimes mental health related, but it's really a very complex issue, and there will be no simple solutions, but we want to be part of the solutions for our community locally. We also launched the Grand Challenges. Most of you, I think, probably know what those are. We identified 3 of them. They're on their way. Sustainable water resources, successful aging, substance use disorders. We have education committees, community connections committees. We've got ongoing seminars and presentations, and this will continue. And then finally on this slide, I did announce that I was launching traveling office hours. And I have been doing those usually on Wednesdays, 10:30 to 11:30. I am someplace if I am not forced to be out of town or in some other meeting. And I just want to thank those units that have hosted me. I've had the opportunity to meet with many students, staff, and faculty. People just show up to share with me information. A lot of times I get to know the people that are actually working in individual units as well. So it's been a remarkably good experience for me, and it is something that I intend to continue as part of the listening and learning. That is really something leaders must continue to do every day to have any hope of being effective in dealing with the opportunities and challenges that public higher education faces all over the country. I did have one piece of good news I got today. The state of New Mexico received the only Goldwater Scholar in the country. There were like 5,000 college sophomores and juniors that were in the pool. And we had a winner in Eric Putney, who is one of our UNM physics undergrads. He intends to pursue a PhD in particle physics and to research antimatter with CERN, the Global Research Organization. So that's a good piece of news related to the success of our students. And with that, I will open it up to questions. Don't be shy. We have a microphone. I couldn't have answered every question with my brief presentation. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, President Stokes and distinguished administration. My name is Mary Clark. I'm with Facilities Management, and I'm also on Staff Council. We've heard that this year had been the year where the legislature was going to address public education. We've heard that the next legislative session is where they're going to address higher education. Have you started to think of any legislative priorities along those lines? And I would hope that some of it would include the extreme backlog of facilities preventative maintenance.
Right. Well, this is what happens when the word gets out about what you want to prioritize, but I'm not sure we have the buy-in from the governor and the legislature about whether next year will be the year of higher education, but certainly the Council of Presidents, many of our leaders, our board, members of our board have been talking about how we understood the serious issues faced in the state and understood the focus on early childhood, on K through 12 education, but that we have to really invest in education across the range, because that is where we can see a real difference in the impact of what we do here in New Mexico. So we haven't yet come up with specific legislative priorities. I'm looking forward to getting a report on our facilities condition index so that we can know just how serious. We know it's serious. We know it's a big serious, but exactly where we face some of the most challenging facilities issues. So that data will be helpful for us as we frame our plans for the upcoming legislative session. We will never drop from among our very highest priorities the issues of compensation for our faculty. And our staff. We made a concerted effort in this past legislative session to explain that when we receive funding for compensation for staff and faculty, that we have an awful lot of staff and faculty who are actually not funded through the state appropriations. And so, and we don't have but two revenue sources for that. So, and that would be state appropriations and tuition as ways of actually funding compensation. So I know that we're going to make an even bigger push for that in this coming legislative session. I think that what we're dealing with right now may help inform people a little more about just what a challenge it can be to deal with compensation packages at our institution in particular. Other institutions had to raise tuition 6% to fund it as well. I think that there could be some movement on a number of fronts. We are always focused on the formula itself and how can we get more funding directed to the universities for us to use to our highest needs. So that has been something that we will continue to focus upon. Okay. Other questions?
My name's Elisha Allen. I'm Director for Academic Technologies, and you've been here about a year, done a lot of work getting the lay of the land and meeting the university. I'm wondering, with the new leadership coming in, Where does strategic planning fall in your priorities for the coming year?
Thank you for that question. It needs to be among my highest priorities, actually, because we have a 2020 strategic plan kind of coming to an end, and launching a strategic planning process is something that I'd hoped to already have accomplished, but I really am recognizing the importance of having a leadership team fully in place, because that team needs to be engaged along with the rest of campus in formulating what our next strategic plan should look like. So I would expect leaders to be fully in place for fall semester, and given that strategic planning must involve our staff and our faculty, launching in early fall, that process seems like the best timing for us moving forward. You know, there are a lot of things going on. We're going to see leadership change in our UNM Foundation, and we've had a big capital campaign that's coming to a close. It was more than $1 billion. We're going to have to look at you know, how we ramp up our fundraising for private support and other types of philanthropic support going forward. And that kind of fundraising initiative is best driven by an institutional strategic plan as well. So it will really help shape a number of things that we would need to do in the future for thinking about where should UNM be in 5 years, 10. We really need to be thinking further out, although these plans have to be living and breathing documents that are updated to fit and adapt to kind of an evolving situation for most public research universities in the country. Does that answer your question? All right, thank you.
Hi there.
Hi.
I missed your slide on the faculty union, so I apologize if this has already been answered. But I'm Jessamine Lovell, and I'm a lecturer from the Department of Art.
Yes.
That's the blue hair.
I love it.
My biggest question is kind of a big one, and again, my apologies if I missed it in that slide, but if you could talk a little bit about your decision in collaboration with the Regents or on your own or under legal advice to not accept the original bargaining unit that we had proposed as UA-UNM. And then a second part to that question, then I'll sit down and let you answer, is what part of the $60,000 have you already spent paying Jackson Lewis to try to bust our union? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. You know, I may end up referring to Scott Souter, but what I would say is that the proposal for the unionization included every possible title that is reflective of faculty. And as leaders, we had legitimate questions about who would most effectively be part of various bargaining units. The request was for wall-to-wall, including department chairs who we regard as institutional administrators and leaders, and emeritus retired faculty. We also raised some questions about the similarities in among tenured and tenure-track faculty and faculty who are not on the tenure track or tenured. So those are just legitimate questions that we believed we needed an opportunity for people to really process. So it was for those reasons that we didn't automatically accept what the union was bringing to administration. We feel like these are important issues for everyone to fully understand. Scott, do you have a figure on how much we've spent on a firm that's designed to represent management in a process that has legal counsel on both the labor and management side?
President Stokes, as I sit here, no, I don't.
Okay.
So I can find that answer.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Other questions?
Hi, my name is Heather Himmelberger. I'm in the School of Engineering. I run a center there. I'm kind of a strange position in the university that it's a staff position. We're fully public service oriented, so it's all soft money. So we deal with the university, what I'll call the administrative side, you know, like the HR, travel, the VPR's office to do proposals and that kind of thing. And sometimes from my perspective, and I know some of my colleagues' perspectives, it feels too much like an us and them environment, that the administration side is put there to protect the university from folks like us who are here to take advantage of it or something. And I feel like we could have a much more collaborative environment where we're both helping each other. So I'll give you just a couple of examples on travel, and I travel a ton. I'm probably gone 2 or 3 trips a month, so it's a lot of travel, so I'm dealing with the travel office all the time. So they had an open house, and we had a number of questions about how travel should work, and this was last fall. And one of our best questions was, how much time should we expect there to be between when it gets in Chrome River and you've approved it and they're going to send you a check? And they told us the answer is there isn't any set amount of time. If you want your money, you need to email us and say, hey, you know, it's been a couple of weeks. And to me, that's not the right answer. The right answer should be there's some period of time that's typical. And maybe that's a week, and maybe it's 10 days, or maybe it's 2 weeks. But then if you're outside of that time frame, you know that's the time to bug. Or if you're in that time frame, I know not to bother them. So it just feels weird to be like, you know, not on the same page as to how things will work. Or sometimes, like the VPR office has changed, where proposals, you have an appointment. And in life, stuff happens. So there's sometimes something comes up and you can't make that appointment. Well, then it's this big deal of, okay, well, you got to start the whole process over again as our official position. And so I sometimes feel like it's too much of a us and them, and we could solve some of this by maybe collaborating a little bit more and seeing both sides of the story. I'm not saying we're, you know, we're right, they're wrong, or anything like that, but just how do we get on the same page? So that we have a, you know, a very smooth functioning university where we all benefit.
I love your philosophy. That's exactly what we'd like to see. There is no doubt in my mind. And, you know, I'm not sure if there's someone at the table who's able to talk about what the actual timeframes are.
Timeframes, no, but overall question.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Heather, I think it's a great question. All of us who travel, whether it's faculty or staff, know what a pain in the neck it can be to just the simple processes of getting reimbursed. And especially if someone who travels as much as you do, just keeping track of, you know, that was 6 weeks ago, did I get reimbursed or not? It becomes a burden unto itself. We think we've made some real strides on this just in recent months. The ADVANCE, the NSF-funded effort to improve life for faculty, and particularly women in STEM and underrepresented minorities, spearheaded an effort with my office, with the VPR, and with the purchasing department to look at everything about our travel policies in particular and try and generate a much cleaner, simpler, straightforward way of doing all that work. You'll see that stuff coming into effect now, but I'm not here to tell you that I know we got it all right. We took a really good run at it. Bruce Sharon, head of purchasing, did some really good work. Things like, you know, the airline marketplace has changed, and now there's this low-end economy fare that, according to the old UNM rules, that's all that UNM would pay for, and that meant you then had to pay for your seat and for your scientific equipment and your luggage, right? And so we flexed those rules to make it a much more reasonable kind of system. I'm not sure we got it all just right, so we're going to need continuing feedback. And the question of timeline, I don't know why you got an answer that says there is no such timeline. That's something we can work on, because I think you're right. There ought to be a reasonably predictive timeline that you can rely on.
No, can you pass that down? Looks like.
I'm Craig White. I know you're making the bigger point, which I agree with as well, about the collaboration and learning from each other. In terms of specifics around Chrome River, I believe there is a timeline that's been shortened. And Liz, I don't know if you mind commenting on this. And part of that, I mean, in terms of the policy, and that's where we could kind of learn somewhat from each other, is that tool allowed us, as you know, to kind of improve control, make sure things were done right, and also get reimbursed quicker, and also have that requirements to be a little sooner than under the old process.
Thank you, Liz.
Hi, Heather. I'm Liz Metzger. I'm the controller, and it sounds like your area would process through our accounting office. So what I'd like to request is if I can give you my contact information, and we can look at the specifics of your issue so we can kind of dig down and see maybe what has happened. But I agree with all the responses. We would like to make it as easy as possible, as fast as possible, and as little red tape as possible. So if you're able to stay till the end, I'll give you my contact information, and let's talk about some of the details, if that's okay.
Thank you. Another question? Too bad we don't have a system where people who are watching from live stream can like send us questions. We'll plan for that for another of these forums. I've heard of doing this on Twitter on occasion too. Occasionally things that are a problem get brought to my attention on Twitter. So I had something this morning.
Good afternoon. I'm Bonnie Lee Reifsteck in the policy office. In your first year in office and at town halls like these, I'm sure most of the questions focus on what are your ideas and your initiatives for the rest of us. And I just wondered if you've thought about what you need from us, or what you might like to see from staff and faculty and students, and what we might do to help you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because an awful lot of the initiatives that I end up talking about were in fact brought to me by people on campus who said, I really think there's a serious issue with safety, for example. And so it was through people bringing me those issues that I was able to identify things we could move on really quickly, and perhaps some things that take a lot more time. Even the military-friendly, veteran-friendly initiative was brought to me by people on campus. So what I have been relying on then is for people to, and I get it via, like I said, a variety of means. People come to me at traveling office hours and tell me the things that are on their mind and things that they're concerned about. I think about the enrollment management task force, where people from all over campus, and I think even outside, provided their thoughts about what we might do to deal with that challenge. Certainly the Grand Challenges really was an initiative that came from significant work of our faculty within the Office of Research. And so for me, the best thing that people can do for this university is make sure that we know what you see and believe. Many of you are staying up to date on new developments in curriculum, new types of degree programs that would serve our students much better, ways of doing business that actually remove some of that bureaucracy and red tape. I had a root beer float party at my house yesterday, at University House. My husband and I did. And I had a student come up and share with me an idea of raising additional money for campus safety by allowing naming rights around the duck pond, and wanted to see how we could do that. So, I think I am served best by people's willingness to approach and share information about what we can do to be a better university for New Mexico. And you're in an office where you're developing policies that can drive, so many ways that we do things. So I appreciate what your office can bring to the ways in which we actually make things more seamless and fairer and more transparent for everybody. So, thank you. Anyone else? I'm surprised the leaders up at the table aren't deciding to ask me questions. It's like, what did you say about that? Oh, good. Good Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Kathy Binger from Speech and Hearing Sciences.
Okay.
What I'm wondering about is if there are any conversations going on about retention for faculty, or who, in particular, faculty who are interested in attaining external funding kind of research careers, and those who have external funding. I'm sure you're all very well aware that we've lost a lot of people in recent years, some of whom were our strongest external funded people. So what are the conversations that are going on? The 3% raise for everyone is a fantastic start. What else is happening?
So I probably should defer a little bit to Health Sciences and Main Campus in terms of some of those conversations, because I know, for example, that in the Provost's office there's been a real push to further develop faculty, and some programs that are put in place to try to assist our faculty in having a better experience in reaching their goals here at UNM. We also recognize how important it is to compensate performance, and so some of the discussion that's going on is, how do we build pools that are intended to help us retain faculty? So I agree that 3% across the board, given that we've had years of really little cost of living increases, it's just a drop in the bucket for what we really need to be able to do to provide greater support for our faculty, especially those engaged in research that is funded from a variety of sources, including the federal government. I think so much of what needs to happen is really the provision of greater support and greater support networks for our faculty. But I know there may be some things that, in addition, something specific that might be happening on Health Sciences side or in the Provost's office.
So I think that's a great question. I'm Mike Richards, Vice Chancellor for Clinical Affairs at the HSC. And I think that the concept of faculty retention and staff retention has been really on the forefront of our mind at the Health Sciences Center. A big part of what we do there, in addition to the academic mission, is the clinical mission. And as we know, that's a very challenging workspace for both our faculty and our staff. And so we've actually been on we're entering in year 3 of what we call our mission excellence journey. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. And it's bringing in some of the evidence-based leadership models and some of the best practices for academic medical centers and health sciences centers on how to improve the workplace. And that evidence-based leadership model that we've put in place is, it involves doing some very specific and targeted leadership development, and that's a big piece of it. Another component of it is providing some very specific skills and some tactics that involve all of our workforce, designed to make the workplace, a more friendly, more accessible place, because it is a challenging work environment. But while we're working on those very specific mission excellence tactics, we've also implemented a whole host of operational improvement initiatives, just designed to kind of address some of the basic business systems that we've kind of already talked about on Main Campus that are both challenging for both the staff and faculty, but also the patients. And that work is being done in collaboration with a group called Huron, and it really is touching almost all aspects of our business systems. In addition to that, we've been working collectively with both the providers and staff to identify some early workplace initiatives that we could address. And we had a question about IT, and an example of that is implementation of a single sign-on for the ability to use the computers, which really in some ways may not be a giant initiative, but actually really can change the day-to-day work environment of individuals to be able to easily get onto the technology. Then another really kind of surrounding the mission excellence initiative for us, and which you may have heard about, is that that we really do have to do some work on our physical plants. And that was kind of brought up today too. And one of the biggest initiatives that we have is movement towards building the new 96-bed replacement tower, which will give us both additional capacity to help decompress the healthcare demand that we've got, but also to put folks in a more contemporary work environment that will actually make doing the things that they're here to do easier to do. And then not last at all, but kind of surrounding all of this is a very specific initiative around wellness and well-being that actually is targeting both the faculty and staff, but also the learners. And so there isn't just one set of initiatives around this faculty retention. It's really a whole constellation, as of some examples of what we're doing at the Health Sciences Center.
Thank you.
On main campus, a couple things going on, but I want to start with the premise of your question because I think it's really critical that we be thinking about this right now. And on this, I know I do speak for President Stokes, and if not, she'll shake her head next to me here and you'll know that I'm wrong. For this university to be the university that New Mexico needs, even in times when we have not had reasonable across-the-board kinds of increases for everybody, we also have to be constantly creating funds to reward merit, which is what you're talking about. Reward the most productive faculty and staff who are really breaking their tails to do incredible, groundbreaking work. If you can't reward that, you're not going to get that kind of work over the long term. And we are absolutely committed that we're going to find that money to invest in the best work out there. How we do that has been the challenge. The two things currently happening, in 2018, like occasionally in previous years, there was a fund available out of the Office of the Provost that deans knew about to apply to for funding for really strong merit and retention cases, and we distributed that money on kind of a case-by-case basis around the strongest cases available. But it wasn't enough money to address all the cases of merit in faculty and staff. That's the reality of our budget situation these days. That's the kind of standard approach. More innovatively, the second thing is that one of the deans brought forward a proposal. Could we produce a system where faculty members make their full salary, but define their workload as 0.9 instead of 1.0, and then supplement their salary with research funds, community engagement funds that they raise from outside the university? And we looked at that, and it's sort of parallel to what HSC does on their compensation side, but it's a way to allow people to make additional compensation by virtue of producing outside money. So as a pilot project, we okayed one college to do that this last year. As a pilot project, we're now evaluating it, and that's a potential model for doing in other parts of the university. But you got to think hard about unintended consequences, resentments you can build up doing that. So it's an experimental thing as of now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Were you shaking your head next to me as I said it?
I was nodding. I realize I really need to have a better poker face, don't I? Other questions for us?
You mentioned that you have these traveling town halls. How do
Traveling
you
office
decide,
hours.
or office hours? How do you decide where you're going? Can people request it? And what
Yes.
size of unit does it have to be in order to request a town hall?
It has varied considerably. Really, I think largely we announced that we're looking to do traveling office hours, and units volunteer to have it. And so they have been of varying sizes. My very first traveling office hour was in the Department of Biology, so we met in one of the greenhouses, and I met a lot of faculty, staff, and students at that one. I've been in the Department of English. I've been in enrollment management and financial aid. I was in Agora recently. I've really been in a variety of units that some of them student services. I have been with the various student services groups as one. One time I met with arts and sciences administrative staff, so a room full of people working in that college. So it really is about just getting it scheduled. And it can be small or big. I think the thing I always tell people about, though, is that Because it's a traveling office hour and people across the campus are going to be aware of it, sometimes someone will come to talk to me very specifically for a couple of minutes about a very specific issue. And so, you know, it is different every time how they actually work. But a lot of times I get to spend the time just talking to small groups or talking to somewhat larger groups and answering their questions. So it's adaptable. I'm flexible in how it can unfold in various areas of campus. I think if you just sent something to the president's office, President Stokes, I would go somewhere. I'm sure there's probably something more formal, but that, Terry?
Yeah, there's a website that's the president's traveling office hours. You can look at kind of the schedule, get an idea, and if you send an email to President Stokes at UNSW and request a date, then
we'll get it on. So we usually have some light refreshments, and it's been very good. I did it as a provost at Missouri. And decided that it worked so well that I had to try it here, and it's been even more successful than I expected. So, anyone else? You know, it's a grand opportunity. Well, seeing no one else jumping up, I want to say thank you for joining us today. Thank you to this leadership team for spending a little time on a Friday afternoon to answer your questions. It's always helpful to hear what's on the minds of our campus. And so thank you very much for deciding to attend today, and take some cookies and popcorn, okay? All right, thank you.